what's a piece of advice that you'd give someone that's listening right now? Maybe they haven't started squirreling away money to buy the first farm, but they're thinking about it. So what would you tell someone that's at that stage right now?
Yeah. Well, and I'm for sure not an expert on any of this, but I think the biggest thing that that helped me was just starting. I mean, that was the hardest step. It's like, it's really easy to use that to go out for dinner or go to a movie or buy a weed whipper or whatever. But once I got started, it actually came a lot easier. It was kind of not like it was another bill or anything like that, but it was just like, okay, I know that I'm going to set aside like this much and this much. And so then it kind of builds that way. And that made it a lot easier. It's just getting started.
Yeah, in personal experience too, when you put that down payment down on a farm, it's like, oh man, it knocks the wind out of you. But after some time goes away, like you kind of forget about it, and obviously the emotional pain of spending the money is still there, but it's kind of gone. It's like it's out of sight, out of mind, and then now you're locked in, and you've started the snowball, the process of having a piece of ground. Is that the same thought that you had or feelings that you've had up to this point? I know it's kind of fresh still.
Yeah, for sure. So it was once we kind of had everything like figured out, like what I'd be able to afford and all that, and then we found the property. It was like, okay, so roughly this is going to be the down payment. And so once I got that like my head wrapped around that, it was kind of like, okay, so just as you're looking at the numbers, right, just subtract that right off the top, and it made it a little bit easier when I went to get the check. But I was still a little bit,
like,
oh man,
You're not human if you don't feel that. So what were some resources along the way that really helped you? Obviously, Alex seemed like he played a really big role in this being successful, but what else helped along the way?
From like a personnel standpoint, Alex is probably the number one thing. I mean, he's been super great to work with, like I've said a couple times now. And for me anyways, it was kind of comforting to continue to be like checking Landwatch and the Weiss Realty website and all that stuff. They gave me comps and everything too, but just to like look at some different things and like, okay, like put my mind at ease a little bit with some of that stuff. Yeah, and then just the seller was actually really, really great, and they let me go and put a camera out, and I didn't like do a ton of anything, but I put a camera out on the corner of the corn that's in there, and the buck pictures helped a little bit.
For sure. Yeah. Is this the last piece of ground you think you'll own, or is this step one for you?
No. So, I mean, ultimately, and I'm sure that a lot of people have the same goal or dream, right? But I'd like to have, either a handful of smaller pieces. I know that people talk about that all the time. Like, is it better to have like a 240, or is it better to have 6 different 40s? But something, like that, where, you've either got like one big property or a handful of smaller ones. I'd say next step for this one is to get those improvements made next spring. And one thing that I've been talking quite a bit about is trying to build like a resume for this property. So, trail camera pictures, harvest pictures, all that kind of stuff. I think that can all, or hopefully it will anyways, play into kind of being able to sell this one and roll it into something bigger. And because this one's, it's pretty small on the acreage side, but I also didn't want to like way overextend on this first one, because you could put yourself in a world of hurt really, really quick. And so, something smaller, a little bit more manageable from a financial standpoint kind of made sense to me. And, if things go well on this one and you're able to, kind of roll it into the next one, maybe a little bit bigger, and do that again a couple times, then you're sitting in a pretty decent sized chunk of ground, but you've done it a couple times at that point. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for anyways. Start small and roll it into the next thing.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing too is your checklist becomes more optimized too, of what you think is really important. Maybe some of those aren't as important, or things that you didn't think were that important become essential moving forward.
Sure.
What was a myth that you maybe heard or thought about buying land that was debunked when you made this purchase?
I mean, I think the big one was just that, you've got to have just like a ton of money in your bank account. You've got to be able to just have like access to all these unlimited funds. And that definitely was not the case. Yeah, I would say that's the biggest one. That was a pretty big deterrent for me, because like you see especially like all the really big farms that, pop up on Land Watch, all the different, land websites, and like, man, that'd be really nice. But you see a price tag of like $1 million plus, something like that. It's like, man, there's no way. And so, yeah, I would say that was the biggest one for me,
Mhm.
was just kind of talking with the credit union a little bit and being like, okay, what can I reasonably, be approved for, and like, here's kind of my budget, my monthly stuff. What can we do?
Yeah, and I think the other misconception is on a lot of those ginormous pieces, people think that the people that buy those that's their first farm that they bought. In reality, most of those people are 1031 and into that one because they're on step 8 of, this entire process, and there are certainly people that do that. But that's that's something that I've come to learn too, because I think like, man, the only people that can buy that, did they win the lottery or what?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, especially in this area, I mean, some of the bigger farms are, they're going for some pretty good money, and it's like, man, that's wild. But like you said, I mean, people build into those, I'm sure. So
Yeah. So, and how important or unimportant was it that, I mean, you bought into a premier county when if people had to come up with 5 counties that come to mind when they talk about deer, this is one of them. So was that important? Not important? Was it a perk for you?
so I kind of was looking at that from more of a like a resale standpoint, to be honest. I mean, I feel like you put that tag on any sort of property, and people take it more seriously, like automatically. I wasn't like attached to having something in a county like that, but when it came up like this, I definitely I didn't shy away from it at all.
Sure.
It was kind of like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And like I said, I mean, you put that on there for like resale value or anything, and I think people will like that.
So did the people that owned this before, did they deer hunt it, or was it just a parcel that they had?
So my understanding of it is the piece got like, it was a giant part of a giant piece that got sold at auction to a handful of different people. The people who bought this section of it were just looking to sell off some of the wooded chunks to make back some of their money and everything like that. So I don't think that this has been hunted. Like, when I have been in there, there's nothing, no fresh sign, no garbage, no anything like that. So that's been pretty cool. There were a couple, like really old tree stands in there too, which for whatever reason I always kind of like to see those too.
Those are cool to see. Yeah. And that brings up another point too on some of these auction parcels where it's mixed tillable. You know, if someone's buying that strictly for farming, a lot of them don't necessarily have as much interest or importance on keeping that timberland, where that could be a great opportunity to even follow some auctions. And if you can do some due diligence, figure out who bought them, that could be a way to find an off market deal too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I have kind of been looking at, like, moving forward, like, where do I go next? I mean, that worked out pretty well. And like we were kind of talking before this, I mean, this piece never really even made it to the market. So I had first crack at it, which was really nice too, especially the way that the market has been kind of going like gangbusters around here.
Yeah, for sure. You have to have resources and like people in place, or you have to be doing a lot of legwork. I think to find something like this, because I'm sure if it was listed on the MLS or listed online, it would have been scooped up in a day.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.